Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath and co-founder of the Kidney Disease Solution and Kaigenesis, Fiona, and I'm joined again today by the beautiful Nicole Williams from the Kidney Nutritional Institute. Nicole is an amazing being. She works with Jessiana and her team, but Nicole has a certification in life coaching, but also a master's in public health. So she's really been around the hospitals and working with patients in that field about how to deal with chronic diseases. And of course, now she specializes in working with people diagnosed with kidney disease. So Nicole, welcome back to the podcast. So great to have you back, and your pearls of wisdom last time was so great. So I'm really excited to have you again. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me again.
So today we wanted to talk, one of the questions we get a lot from people in our audience is just the anxiety around being diagnosed with kidney disease. And it's of course something I understand really well, having been diagnosed with an incurable disease myself, being multiple sclerosis. So this I understand and get really well. So Nicole's been generous enough with her time to come on and for us to go through what anxiety looks like, actually how common it is. You're not alone out there when you've been diagnosed with a common disease and a chronic disease, and then some things that you can do about that and how to combat that. So Nicole, I'm going to hand over to you, but let's just start with because some people are really good at hiding anxiety and things like that. So how would someone experience anxiety? How do we identify that that's a physiological experience for somebody if they've been diagnosed with kidney disease? And of course, maybe go on to explain just actually how normal and common that is so we can normalize it for people.
Absolutely. So first, I want to say that that this is a pretty big topic, right? And there's multiple tenets to anxiety and ways in which we can talk about it and think about it, particularly for clients who have kidney disease. So my intention today is really to help define it, normalize it, as you just said, share some common experiences that I have seen and heard from the clients I've spoken with, and then provide the listeners with some tangible things to think about and some really simple tools that they can have for themselves. So the interesting thing about anxiety is it is an emotion, and it's usually characterized by feelings of fear, dread. And so that's coming from the thought processes around what's either happening to you or what could be happening in the future. What also happens, though, is that we do have a physiological response. So our hearts could start beating really rapidly. We may start sweating. Some people can experience like an upset stomach. So you'll notice for certain individuals, they may notice those body sensations first because they present, but it's really a pattern of that thought of dread, maybe ruminating thoughts, tension, those sorts of things of what can happen in the future if you notice that about yourself as you're thinking about that.
Yeah, I find it really interesting you say it's an emotion and a physiological response, because I think some people fall in mostly to the physiological response part. So the fact that it's an emotion, I guess, brings it back to feeling like we have a bit more control around it, because a physiological response, a bit like kidney disease, feels like we're out of control. An emotion feels like we're more in control. So that's a nice nuance there that you've pointed out.
Yes. And I will tease that out a little bit more when we get into like some of the strategies around it, but that's exactly right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great. So talk through some of the times that people may be triggered to get anxiety when they've been diagnosed with kidney disease, because, that for me, the diagnosis wasn't the big thing. It was this is what your life is going to potentially look like, which, can sometimes be what we call the pointing the bone or being given a curse. I really had I had to do a lot of work around feeling like someone else wasn't allowed to give me my potential future reality. So that was what really triggered me, but obviously it's going to be different for people. So what are the kind of things that will really trigger this emotion and then physiological experience of anxiety for people with kidney disease?
Yeah. So with anxiety being much of a focus on what can happen in the future, I'll just share briefly some of the common kind of experiences that I hear from clients. First being around any either doctor's visits or testing. And so that's very common. The interesting thing with testing is that that's a little bit of a longer process, which your anxiety can happen at any moment within that path. So that may look like preparing for a test, right? So there's this pre-testing or pre-blood work, we'll say, phase. Maybe as you're preparing to then be seen by the doctor or the person who's actually drawing your blood, anxiety can peak then. You're waiting for results. It's a longer, feel like a longer process. And so the anxiety then, for some individuals, may also feel then prolonged, right? It's not just around one event, it's around this long series of events that can stretch out for weeks or months, depending. So I definitely see that a lot. The other part of this is what I have here in my notes, it's the rabbit hole of information. And what I mean by that is not just Dr. Google, but what's happening now is this Facebook groups. Now, I firmly believe in building community, but what I have heard from several clients is that when they're in these groups, right, it is a trove of information and experiences and stories. And so as someone is trying to find answers for themselves, they then can get caught in this space where they're reading the stories and experiences of others. And most of those can be really sad. And often trigger your own anxiety of thinking, what if this happens to me? I've also spoken with some clients who want to arm themselves with everything. And so they've jumped on this ban of researching every single thing that they can find, to the point where they're now extremely anxious about every little thing that happens to them or may happen to them. So that's pretty common. The last example I have noted in here is really from the what I've noticed from the PKD community, and that is feeling triggered or anxious when you're thinking about what happened to your family member or loved one. And so thinking about whether that experience will happen to them personally. I was recently speaking with a client and she was recalling her dad who passed away from PKD, but what she was sharing is that he needed a lot of support from someone in the home, and he also needed additional financial support. And so as she was thinking of her future, she began to feel anxious that she may not have all of those pieces in place for herself. And so those are some of the examples that come to mind immediately as I was kind of thinking about this.
Yeah, no, I can definitely resonate with those, especially like you say, people have watched close ones go through it before, so they've got a lived experience. It's very different, which of course we'll see more in the polycystic kidney disease community. So yeah, that totally makes sense. So, okay, so we've gone through what anxiety is and, you know, the triggering events. And I guess too, also people being told they'll go on dialysis and transplant. I mean, a transplant alone, you know, I can see that would be scary, and being attached to a dialysis machine. So I get all of that too. So what are some strategies and what are some ways that you give your clients to combat this? And like you were going to tease some of that stuff out. So take us through that, of what that would, if someone was coming to see you, how do you work with people through this and how do you support them?
Yeah. So first, I want to identify how we can begin to just slowly shift the mindset. So do some of the mind work. And that comes along with understanding the anxiety and fear a little bit more for yourself, anticipating and sort of forecasting the worst case scenario. It's interesting because our brain is always looking to protect us, right? And so it's kind of wired for survival. So in that example with the Facebook groups, even if there are stories of hope and possibility, we don't tend to remember those. We tend to remember sort of those worst case scenarios. But one idea that I really have thought about lately and that I want to unpack more as I continue to work with clients is this idea of preparation versus really forecasting and mapping out catastrophes, right? And so as you think about your anxiety and fear, maybe you feel that you're preparing yourself. Could be. But when you are overly focusing on what the outcome could be, then you've stepped away from preparation. I met with a client recently, and she definitely had done her share of mind work and mindset work. And she says, she also unfortunately has sickle cell. And she says, I did some work in preparing in case I have to go into the hospital. I've researched what hospital can best meet my needs as a client who also has sickle cell. So I've registered there, and she kind of did some groundwork for herself. But the minute that she allows herself to kind of focus on when she would need to go to the hospital or what event might trigger her to go to the hospital, that's really when you start to have that anxiety piece kind of pop in for you. So the first step is understanding when that happens for you. In the example of the pre-testing period, using that as a starting point, right? When do you notice that your anxiety peaks? At what point along that chain of events do you notice that happens? And taking some time to do some inventory, because once you identify either the event, the trigger, it could be the time of day. Nighttime seems to be a time when anxiety can peak for many individuals. We then can talk about strategies for helping you. So that's the first step that I kind of try to tease out for clients and support them in understanding why that's important and how we can begin to identify ways to help them feel better in those moments. When it also comes to noticing your thoughts, thinking about how often you think about your illness also would be really important.
Yeah, okay.
I know that having a chronic condition, it's a huge part of your life, and there's so many changes that you have to make. But taking time or really taking inventory on what you're thinking about is equally as important. Remembering that you are a whole person and thinking about ways in which your body is supporting you. How is it working in your favor? How hard is it? What are the other parts of you as a person that are functioning well and that are really doing well? Is very critical and important. Then allowing space or allowing for these thoughts and feelings to come and go. We talked about earlier, like the physical sensations that seem to precipitate. And even as someone who's experienced anxiety myself, right, when those feelings arise, I'm like, what's happening? You want them to go away immediately. And it's good to remember that they will go away kind of naturally, almost like, I use the analogy of like an ocean wave, it rises and then kind of crashes and falls. And so that in the same way happens for our feelings when we experience them. The trick is giving yourself the space just to feel them in the moment. And then the last part of that is kind of acting or taking action to doing something about it. And I can jump into that now, unless you had another question about what I just shared.
No, I think that's good. I wanted you to tease out the emotion a bit more, but you may be doing that later. So just because I think for me, when you said that, when people can identify it as an emotion, it's really very empowering, right? Because it's not this thing that's, because I think a lot of people experience anxiety as this thing that happens to you that you're out of control of. As soon as you go, well, actually, it's an emotion the same way I feel anger, sadness, jealousy, joy, love, whatever. But I think because the narrative around anxiety is it's not that when it comes back to actually just being a emotion, just like anything else, then it's like, oh, well, okay, it's just an emotion. Yes, it carries a physiological sine wave to it, but so does love. And it's just the anxiety one's not very nice because you get this elevated heart rate, but you get an elevated heart rate with anger. but it's just anxiety is probably the most physiologically yucky one. But I think there's such an empowering part of knowing that it's just an emotion like the others, because yes, maybe just talking to that point, unless you were going to do that later. I didn't want to take you out.
No, yeah, I can definitely touch on that. So part of any emotion that we experience precipitates first from a thought, right? And so when we become really clear and aware of what our thoughts are, which you're going to dig into that when you start to ask yourself, and there's simple questions, Fiona, like, okay, when you notice that feeling, it's the thought of acknowledging my heart's beating, I'm freaking out. This is how I'll just share how I would say it. Okay, Nicole, you're freaking out, your heart's beating, what's going on with you right now? And so I'm acknowledging that, I'm noticing the physical sensations, but then I'm also saying, okay, what's the thought? What am I thinking about that could be causing me to feel this way in this moment? And you're exactly right. Once we begin to shift that thought, it can very much, very quickly change how we're feeling and immediately produce a different action. So that's really the part that I think it's important, and it's empowering. It's actually placing you back in control.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. It's empowering to say, okay, I can examine my thoughts. I can shift this feeling I'm having. Maybe my circumstance in the moment doesn't change, but how I'm responding to it can change.
Yeah.
So that is a way to bring that power back to you.
Yeah. And I think that, to your point about their thoughts, this is where I love the work of people like Byron Katie and Peter Crone. It's just a thought. The problem is we believe the thought. So we have the thought that, for instance, my neurologist, after I was diagnosed with MS 15 years ago, whatever it is, you'll be in a wheelchair in 5 years. So that thought would induce anxiety. But I'm like, well, that's not the case. That hasn't been the case. But believing the thought was what was the anxiety inducer. So believing the thought around kidney disease, you'll automatically have a decline and you'll have to have a transplant and need dialysis, and your quality of life will disappear and it's going to cost all this money. Well, and that's where, like you say, our brains, and then if you're in all these forums, our brains actually look to solidify our thoughts about being right.
Yes.
So then we hone in on all these stories, missing the plethora of other stories of people that have reversed kidney disease, healed it. We're always trying to reinforce. I don't know why we do this, but there's this default where we reinforce our thoughts so we can be right. Whereas if you can sit and go, well, that's how my brain works and how it functions. How about I look for, and again, people wired slightly differently here, pessimists and optimists, right? So the optimist like me will go and find all the people that cured themselves from MS and focus on that and go, well, it's just a thought. That's not, and it's not true. It's my giving it power that causes all the response and all of those sort of things. So
exactly right. That is exactly it. What's interesting too is our response when we're having fear. A lot of fear is the underlining part of that. It's the result of believing that there's a lack of something. So it's a lack of resources. It's a lack of stability, a lack of health, right? Or a lack of skills or ability. And so when you really start to unpack it, you're like, wait a minute, what is this belief that I have that something's lacking that's pulling up this fear for me right now? And all comes back to that thought and belief.
Yeah. Yeah. And we just believe our thoughts. I mean, it's when you really dig into that, that's when you start to realize how crazy the world is. It's a belief of thought. And that's what actually causes our personality and our realities, is just how we believe thoughts. And if you go, where does the thought come from? I don't want to get too out there, but it's something that just pops into your head. It's not, sometimes we actively think, and then other thoughts just pop in. You're like, okay, well, I'm not going to give power to the popping in, popping out of wherever that comes from sort of thing. So I'm glad you spoke to that, because I think that's really empowering when you realize just thoughts, that's all they are.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly. Yes. Right. Not giving them power is the most important thing. I think, right. they're kind of served up to us. What do you think about this? But we we can choose on how we want to respond to them. That was really good. I think the other thought I had as I was preparing for this is this idea of hope. As we were kind of sharing back and forth on what we would talk about today, we touched a little bit on the loss of hope, right? That someone can have when they're first diagnosed, or putting hope into a cure, or putting hope into their providers. And what I wanted to share is that the hope for your future lies already within you. And it really comes from you deciding that you will be hopeful, or you deciding on how you want to continue to live your life.
Yeah.
There's again, back to some of the client stories that I have. A client recently said, she said, I have fully accepted the diagnosis, but I do not accept the prognosis. She said, I am doing everything to support her body, but also continuing to live her life and taking inventory of what activity she's doing, the hobby she has, the interest she has, and continuing to cultivate that and relying on that as her form of hope, anticipation, excitement, and joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. I think that's really important. That was something that was really important for me. Like, I'm about to go to Bhutan and trek around the Himalaya. Now, if you saw how I walk, I've got a great big bionic leg that goes on my right leg. And I use for that, I'll have to use like crutches or a walking pole. People are like, are you nuts going trekking around the Himalaya? You can't walk further than a couple of kilometers. And that's only with that bionic leg on. And I'm like, it's what I love to do. Like, what am I going to do? Sit on my couch in anxiety and worry? Or I could fall off a mountain even if I was fully able-bodied. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just going to go and wander around the Himalaya. I'll be wobbly, but I still get to go and do what I like to do. So it's just, I have to do things slightly differently, but that's okay. I can still go and do it. I'm going to go do it by myself. So I'm like, what do I want to do? Sit here and die on my couch, or go out and live?
Yeah, that's a great story. Wow. I'd love to see pictures of that, Fiona.
I will definitely be taking, I have to get someone to take them, but yes, I will be taking pictures of me wobbling around the Himalaya with my leg and crutches. So talk us through, because I sort of took you back. Where are you going? You're about to go with just some techniques and things like that people can really to work their way through anxiety.
Right. So action is critically important. And I want to be sensitive when someone is really experiencing that strong moment of anxiety. You do have to acknowledge it first before you take action. So it's that's part of kind of the steps. But action looks like a few things. And I'll just share the few that I have found beneficial and I've shared a lot with others. The first is getting those ruminating thoughts or feelings from head to paper. And so that might look like a traditional journaling practice you have. Don't forget, you can use your phone. You don't have to find a pad of paper and a pen if you're kind of on the go or whatever. I use the notes section in my phone all the time. And there's also another kind of cool practice, and I refer to it as a brain dump. And that is literally all of these kind of thoughts kind of circulating in my mind. I just put them on paper. It's not for anyone else to read. It's not meant to be coherent. It's just what is coming immediately to the forefront for me. And you are, in a sense, giving your brain a little bit of space to breathe. It's an action that you're taking on those thoughts that you're having, and it's a great way to feel that again, you're kind of back in control, back in the seat. The next thing I have on here is meditation. Now, I've heard, I love it too, but I have heard from quite a few clients who don't meditate. That's not my thing. I can't do that. First of all, meditation can be very simple. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes long, right? Practicing some simple breathing exercises, even for a few minutes, to just calm. The amygdala is the part of our brain that's sort of freaking out when we're experiencing any fear or anxiety. So you're calming that part of your brain so that you can support yourself better. So meditation looks like taking some moments of breathing. What I also like to offer clients is a way for them to get more mindful. So in the space of meditation, what that might look like is focusing on what's happening in the moment. Cooking is an example. So you might be cooking and maybe you're experiencing anxiety around preparing these foods that you're new at preparing. You're just now a vegan. And so getting mindful, which means focusing on the specific ingredients, smelling them, maybe tasting a few of them and experiencing what they taste like. I have found some individuals tell me, like, even like the stirring of, like, if you're stirring something in a pot or a pan feels very methodical for them and therapeutic, that motion and just only thinking about that in that moment. So there's ways in which you can kind of get still and get in the moment without having to close your eyes and listen to music or something like that. The other part of this that I actually use and have a lot of experience in is the use of aromatherapy. I've studied that for quite a few years, and just the scent alone has a way, and there's different types of scents that can offer a pause so that you can really center yourself and redirect those thoughts that you're having and experiencing. And these actions, Fiona, are again, really short, simple actions. There's others that someone who has a prolonged experience with anxiety, there's others that you can kind of build in throughout your day to act as kind of a buffer to support you. But I thought these might be a simple way for someone who just needs something in the moment to help.
Do you have a particular breathing practice? Because there's so many great circuit breakers with anxiety, and breath being such a powerful one. Is there one that you could maybe walk us through that people could then practice at home if they're having, almost a full anxiety attack? That's where I really love the breathing techniques. They can really be a physiological interrupter for that whole sort of pathology. Is there anything in there that is your go-to?
I love to recommend square breathing. I find that really great. And I can describe that in a moment, but the other part about the breathing exercises is that we often do a lot of chest breathing, which is kind of our natural pattern of breathing. But I encourage clients to begin to practice what is commonly called belly breathing. So that's breathing from a deeper part of our diaphragm and really filling our whole body with breath. I'm so glad that I just remembered this other thought, is that when someone experiences anxiety, sometimes they hold their breath.
100%, exactly right. Yeah.
So building in a breathing practice for someone like that would be critical. And so first to kind of describe belly breathing, that is actually on the inhale is where you're going to expand your belly button. So I like to put my hand right where that belly button part is. So I can feel the belly kind of pushing out as I'm inhaling. Your chest is still rising. And then on the exhale, it's going in, the belly button is going in towards the spine, and your chest is depressing. Square breathing is so simple. It's essentially taking 4 breaths to the inhale and pausing for 4. And then you're taking 4 breaths to the exhale and then pausing again for 4. So I encourage clients to repeat that if they can until they're feeling really calm. And I just recalled another really good exercise. All of these are coming to mind as I'm talking to you. This is a little more tactile. You actually take your 2 fingers, either your forefinger and your thumb or here. And what you're going to do is you are going to rub those fingers together. And you're focusing on, you're going to have to get slow, because what you're focusing on is feeling the ridges of your skin. And what I like about this, it really forces you to focus only on that, right? Because you have to go very slow. What I love about this practice is it's something you can do literally anywhere. You can be at work with your hands under your desk, practicing that.
I love that one. I've not seen that one before.
And it's a way, right? It's all about shifting your mind back to the present moment. It's really what you're doing. Because again, we're not focused on the future, ruminating on the past, fearing about what could happen. We are only focused on this moment right now.
Great. So we've got, we call it box breathing, but the square breathing. So it's in for 4 counts, hold for 4 counts, out for 4 counts, hold out for 4 counts. And you're recommending people do that as well as the belly breathing. So they're doing that into the belly area?
I do. I have found that as to be even a deeper way to calm faster.
Yeah. And then we've got the rubbing the thumb to either index or middle finger and just really feeling all the little bumps and ridges and all of those, like you say, when you do that, it's bringing people back to the present moment. And in the present moment, you know, what I love about the present moment is present moment. What can I do anything different in the present moment? Like, I just need to be here now, right here, right now. Am I safe? Am I okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah. So right now it's okay. Life's okay. So it's just, we step out of the only moment that ever exists. And then we create this, potentially this crazy menagerie. And then what I also love to suggest long-term is, just like your thoughts can create a scary reality, they can also create an amazing reality. So which is part of I meditate, and then I spend 5 to 10 minutes actually just using visualization of how I want my life to look, which is, I actually literally did that before I jumped on this call with you. I was imagining walking freely and easily, and I've got this image of a woman that looks from behind, she could be me, and she's running up a flight of stairs, and I actually stare at that image, and then I almost project my body into that and imagine right through my body because I can remember what it's like to run. So I was a runner running upstairs and things like that, and then I push that into my future, because I'm just like, well, my brain has, you know, defaults to creating a scary one. I can force it into creating a good one, because it's equally as likely, you know, like, who says what our future is? It's just these, again, thoughts and things, but no one knows, you know, like, we just don't know what's around the corner. So
exactly. We really don't know. I love that. Yes. Visualization is so powerful.
Yeah. So yeah, that's brilliant. Now, is there anything you want to add to any of that, Nicole? Because I think there's some really great practices in there for people. And I think we've really covered what anxiety is. And computer's about to die. Come out of the PowerPoint.
Oh,
so
no.
yeah. So what it really is, what that means to people. How would people know? Is there anything else that I've missed, or anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think we've covered kind of a good basic overview, and just some simple tactics and steps that are really important for anyone who might be experiencing.
Yeah. And just to reiterate what you said right at the beginning, it's common. You know, I don't want people to think that you're alone in that, you know, being diagnosed with any chronic disease, and especially kidney disease, because the narrative around it is a scary narrative. But apart from the fact that we are seeing, and I know Jessiana and yourself, and, you know, through Kidney Coach and Cargenesis, we're seeing this different outcome of people actually reversing what they're told is unreversible and things like that. So, you know, a big part of the feedback we get is just from when people use the program is they got hope, which I'm like, if you just give people hope, that's where people have then the ability to change their future and what that looks like, because there's hope. And I'll never forget when I was diagnosed with MS and my neurologist said, because I work with people with that, they're like, you can't give people false hope. And I'm like, that's an oxymoron. You can't give false hope. Hope's hope. There's no such thing as false hope. False hope's based on the narrative that your belief about it's irreversible is true, but actually there is always exceptions to the rule. And we're seeing now more and more with kidney disease that get some of these foundational things right. And at the very least, for a lot of people, you can halt it. So, and we're seeing the same with MS, and we're seeing these amazing stories of people like Terry Walls reversing it. So, I think it's great that we can work around the fact that not only is the current narrative around these chronic diseases may be incorrect, but that there is no such thing as false hope. So if you've got hope, hope is hope. So it's a good place to start with.
Right. Yeah. That's right. And I think, your mind, it can be a healer for you. Even focusing on hope alone opens up, it expands what you think you can do. It expands your awareness of what's possible. So maybe you'd be more open to another type of therapy that could be the one that unlocks it for you. Or, it just, I can't stress enough for people just to recognize that energetic vibration from that emotion that you have when you invite those positive emotions and thoughts, it just shifts everything for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we know that laughing and joy and all of those things boost your immune system. And I mean, there's lots of studies on that. And if you're in chronic fear, and we know that anger increases your risk of cardiovascular disease and all these other things. So definitely emotions, long-term held emotions, do have the ability to change physiology. So why not choose the good ones?
That's right.
Oh, Nicole, it's been brilliant to talk to you. I think there's some great tips and tricks and tools and things in there for people. If people want to get a hold of you and to work with you, they can just go to the kidneynutritionalinstitute.org website. If you go to meet the team, you'll see Nicole down there, and she definitely is a specialist in working with people with chronic disease, especially kidney disease. And like I say, you've got all that amazing history and your master's in public health, and you understand the public hospital system and the private hospital system and just the processes that people go through with that, which I think is really important for people working with a professional around that area, and the tests and everything that go with it. So if you think you need some support, I would say that counseling or having someone support you and helping you to change the narrative in your head is as equally as important as anything else, like changing your diet and taking supplements. It's, again, the thoughts that we put into our body are as powerful as food and things like that. So I think that's, it's such a key thing. So if you need some support, please reach out to Nicole. I know you do Zoom consults and things like that as well, don't you? So.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Well, I know we're going to have you back because we've got so many fun topics to cover, but I think this is a really important one. So thanks again for your time, Nicole. Again, if you need to reach Nicole, Kidney Nutritional Institute, if you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. Also, if you want to see our Facebook community, they're an amazing community. There isn't a lot of scary stories on there. They're actually filled with hope, and then we put up research papers and things like that. So that's Facebook.com/Kidney Coach. And if you want to be reminded every time we put up a new video, we're putting up great content all the time, hit the subscribe and like button, and you'll get a notification whenever a new video goes up. Again, thank you, Nicole. Thank you for being part of our community. We hope you found this useful. If there's anything that you'd like Nicole to come back and talk about, leave a comment below and we will definitely have a look at that. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.